Before we start today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. The content in this podcast is for general reference and educational purposes only. It is not meant to be complete or exhaustive or to be applicable to any specific individual's medical condition. No information provided in this podcast constitutes medical advice and is not an attempt to practice medicine or to provide specific medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. This podcast does not create a physician-patient relationship and is not a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Please do not rely on this podcast for emergency medical treatment. Remember that everyone is different, so make sure you consult your own healthcare professional before seeking any new treatment and before you alter, suspend, or initiate a new change in your routine. Welcome to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets,
two internal medicine doctors who spent years practicing traditional primary care. Over time, we realized something was missing from modern healthcare. A real understanding of how everyday lifestyle choices impact overall health.
We'll help you cut through the noise of the countless health influencers and their conflicting opinions, because no matter who you follow, the basics of lifestyle medicine are at the heart of it all.
Welcome back to The Starting Gate. We're your hosts, Dr. Kitty Dotson
and Dr. Sarah Sheets.
We hope last week was helpful and that you are taking some extra time to look at those nutrition labels and feeling a little more confident and being able to decipher what you're eating and if it's processed or ultra-processed, and just keep going on with reflecting on what it is that's in your pantry and that you're eating. We're going to continue to talk about nutrition today, and we're also going to talk about feeding our kids. I find it's a lot easier for me to kind of stick to this whole food mission for myself. It's harder for me when I add in feeding the kids there. Now, if you don't have kids, please stick with us today because we're going to still address a lot of topics that will be helpful to you too. But we're really excited because we have our very first guest today. We have Dr. Gina Labovitz, who is a board-certified pediatrician that's practicing here in Lexington, and she is committed to helping patients and their families really navigate complex health issues. And sometimes you can lack the motivation to make changes and do something for yourself, but knowing you need to do it to help your kids thrive and really be healthy, that can be a big motivator for you too. So modeling healthy lifestyle habits will help them now and help them down the road.
And that brings up one of my favorite articles that was from the Journal of Pediatrics. It's an older one in 1991. Titled Influence of Parents' Physical Activity Levels on Activity Levels in Young Children. And this really showed what can happen when your children are watching you make these changes, because children of active mothers are 2 times more likely to be active. And if you have 2 active parents, they're 5.8 times more likely to be active in their childhood. That's huge. Our kids are sponges. They're watching what we eat. They're watching our relationship with food, how we talk about food, how we talk about our bodies, how we move, how we interact with each other, and how we deal with stress when it happens in our life. So just think about that, because it's a big motivator for parents. Realizing what they are doing is also helping their children.
Right. And so today we hope to answer some specific questions and give you specific tips on how to improve your children's nutrition, which will help you improve your own too. But remember, one of the best things you can do for them is to model those good lifestyle habits and make it easier for them to follow and develop those good habits for themselves. So let's get on to meeting Dr. Labovitz. Gina, can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Thank you so much for having me today. This is my first podcast, so super excited. So a little bit about myself is I'm a general pediatrician, as you mentioned, and I am originally from Kentucky. I trained down at UAB in Birmingham, Alabama for my residency, and then I practiced down there for about 6 years and then made my way back up to Lexington, Kentucky. So,
oh, good. Is your family still here?
Yes, my family's in Lexington now, and so it's been really good to be back home.
We're happy to have you back in Lexington.
Thank you.
Can you just give us a little bit of information about your practice? Because I know your practice is set up very unique, and it is really set up to help people or parents to advocate for their children. So can you give us a little insight on that?
So yes, my practice is different. So it's not like the typical primary care practice. So my practice has a very specific intent, and this is to help families, help guide them, and help them work through chronic, complex medical issues in children. And the reason I set this up is because when I worked in just kind of a general pediatrics practice for about 6 years, I found myself, working in a really fast-paced schedule, kind of the typical, at least 30 patients a day, 10 to 15-minute appointments. And I found myself, having a lot of children that I felt like truly could need more time. And with a variety of issues, whether it's sorting out some complex medical stuff that is probably all linked together or, developmental delays, mental and behavioral health, 10 to 15 minutes just definitely wasn't enough.
We understand that, right, Kitty?
Yeah.
And can you tell us what is the name of your practice and where people could find you?
Yeah. So the name of my practice is called Envision Pediatrics. It's located in Lexington, Kentucky. And I have a little space out in Hamburg on Alashiba Way. And basically, the name of my practice is named Envision Pediatrics because I wanted a name that embraced more fluidity and the ability to adapt to the needs of the patient and not being so confined to the current model.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah. And we'll have links in the show notes to Gina's website so that you can find her as well. So we're excited to get your thoughts on kids. And Sarah and I are both internal medicine doctors. And for those of you that don't know, that means really we take care of people 18 and up. So we're excited to have Gina here to give us her thoughts on 18 and lower ages here. And so when I was preparing for today's episode, I was looking up what are the trends that we're seeing in kids' health lately. And the U.S. Children's Health and Wellbeing 5-year trend, and this was spanning 2016 to 2020, listed in JAMA Pediatrics that there were significant increases in children diagnosed with anxiety and depression, a big decrease in physical activity, and then decreases in caregiver mental and emotional well-being, and just apparently difficulty in coping with the demands of parenthood. So would you say what I have researched is kind of what you're seeing in the pediatric population?
Yes, most definitely. I think it's a reflection of so many aspects, but definitely a reflection of societal challenges and, societal pressures on parents and families, but also, a reflection of our environment and, how it's affecting young, growing bodies. And another thing that I think is really important, one trend that I've found on the CDC website, it says that in the United States, more than 40% of school-aged children and adolescents have at least one chronic health condition. And that would include things like asthma, obesity, mental health issues, ADHD, eczema, all of these things that we don't really even think about as chronic issues anymore, because they're so commonplace. And so I think that's really important to think about in the United States is that's where our children are starting out at is with, some of these chronic issues. I truly believe that kids are born to be healthy. They're not born to be sick. And so we have so much opportunity to intervene and change the trajectory of someone's entire life just based on reversal of some of these conditions.
And that's where lifestyle has a huge impact for our kids. And I think that's the environment they're growing up in is causing so many chronic conditions to be on a rise right now.
Yeah, but it's not too late for kids. If your kid is someone that's in this 40% that has a chronic condition, really taking the time to reflect, just like hopefully you've been doing on yourself the last few weeks, but reflect with them and start making these small changes. And I think you'll see the same improvements in them as hopefully you're seeing in yourself.
Definitely. Yeah, there's a huge biological basis for all of these conditions, and they're definitely reversible.
What are some of the things that you have specifically been able to target and from a lifestyle standpoint to help families with that?
Sure. So as far as targeting things from a lifestyle standpoint, I usually try to kind of get a gauge of where the family is at currently. Everybody's coming from different starting points, right? Some people may already be doing certain things or trying to, avoid certain aspects in their diet, but some people may be really starting from a completely different point. And so to me, that's really important to kind of gauge where a family is at now. And then also what types of challenges they're experiencing, as far as time, and are there any barriers to being able to provide certain types of foods for their children, basically.
Yeah, that's something that we really wanted to dive deeper in today is specifically that food topic. And we know that there are big nutritional issues that our kids are facing in America today with the standard American diet. And we know that there is issues with a low quality diet. There's lots of unhealthy eating patterns that are occurring. And obesity is tragically, rapidly increasing in America today in our children. Is this something you're frequently seeing in your practice? And how is nutrition impacting our kids?
Yeah, so nutrition is impacting our kids hugely, essentially. You mentioned the ultra-processed diet and the standard American diet. It's super easy to kind of fall into, when your kids are born, you're busy, you're working. If you're a working family, things are marketed to new parents all the time. And so it's easy to kind of get sucked into that. I know I fell into it with my first kid, but I am glad to see there are some new trends coming out that are getting people back to eating real foods and getting away from some of that ultra-processed stuff.
So do you feel like when people are eating more ultra-processed food that it's leading to certain issues in particular, or?
Yes. So the ultra-processed foods, I've heard them referred to as false foods. A lot of them they don't contain the nutrients that our body needs. And when we think about kids are growing, right? Their cells are brand new. They're supposed to be healthy. They're rapidly dividing. Brain growth is so important at especially developmentally sensitive stages. Yeah. And so when we're feeding kids essentially artificial chemicals and, it doesn't necessarily contain what their body needs for the basic building blocks of their cells and, their organs, that's where we see chronic illness come about and inflammation.
Yeah, and I think something that we always try to help our listeners understand is we're not trying to make anyone feel guilty when we say these things because this is the environment that we all live in. And this is hard stuff when we look at what our children are even served for school lunches and all the different things that they're exposed to. This is a challenge of trying to find that balance of how do you navigate without making them also develop an eating disorder or concerned or overly concerned about foods and balance this. It's hard on parents. It really is. It's a huge stressor. And when you are dealing with this, when you're talking to parents, what is your advice on making these improvements in a child's diet and trying to reduce those ultra-processed foods and increasing those whole foods to help with nutrients?
It's a very complex process, because of the society that we live in. It's time consuming sometimes, to make sure that you have fresh foods. Where do you get them from? You don't want to be throwing out stuff in your fridge all the time. And so it's really tough, especially with the increasing costs of groceries. But some of the simple things, like if I were to have a family that we are starting to talk about an anti-inflammatory diet in a child, which can work wonders for a number of different conditions. But when we're starting that journey, that process, depending on where they are, there are just a few things that I recommend as the low-hanging fruit,
yes.
essentially.
Yes.
Let's go ahead and, start with, okay, I want you to take a look at the labels on your kids' foods and let's try and avoid things that have high fructose corn syrup and maybe let's try to avoid and see what happens. And so those are two of the initial steps can really just open your eyes to, what's going on and what's going into your child's mouth. And then the other things that I usually kind of follow that with is okay, and then let's find a single ingredient food that your child will eat.
Yes, I love that advice. That's great.
Sarah was going to love that one.
Single ingredient foods. And then people just kind of like, well, wait, what's a single ingredient food? It's a whole food, right?
Yes. It's like apple, banana.
Yeah, exactly. And, and some of them too, it's like we forget how portable they are, right?
Yes.
We're so worried about how am I going to package this up and, send this with them? Well, apples and bananas are already packaged.
Nature did it for us. It's great.
Right? Yeah. So really just kind of paring it back and then people would really start to think, okay, and so if you can, find at least one, that's a really good starting point. But there's so much more.
Absolutely. It's very complicated when it comes to this. But I love those easy tips to get started. I think those are great.
Yeah, I think where I struggle a lot with is snacks, and you have to send snacks for everything. It's like you have to send a snack for mid-morning snack at school plus the lunch. And then if they're staying for anything after school, you've got to send another snack for after school. And it's so much faster and easier for me in the morning if I throw some goldfish in a Ziploc bag. And sometimes I just kind of have to hold my breath while I'm doing it because I know it's not the best choice, but it's what's fast and easy to do in the morning because you have to do it all the time for your kids. So do you have any good tips for snacks?
Sure. Yeah, and I agree. I struggle with the same exact thing. I mean, sometimes you need something that's shelf stable that can't sit in a hot bag or hot sun,
Yes.
And so it is a challenge. So when I need to kind of go down that route of like, okay, we need snacks or something quick or easy, I try to go for some of the ones that have the least amount of ingredients that kind of stick to a lot of those whole foods. So if you're looking at maybe some dried fruit or some freeze-dried mango, or there are some packaged foods that have 5 ingredients versus 50.
Right.
So to me, those are some swaps that you can do. And then really just maximizing what you can do in certain areas. Okay, if the snack area is not perfect, focusing on, okay, maybe their after school snack where they're at home and I can give them something fresh or have something ready in the car when I pick them up, something like that.
I love that thought. Yeah, you don't need to feel guilty if not every snack and meal is the perfect nutrient balance. So if you know you're not going to be having a great lunch or mid-morning snack, you really try to make up for that at dinner.
Exactly. Yes. And even, one of the things too that I struggle with is breakfast. Gosh,
yes.
The breakfast.
Kids, you just need to get them out the door.
Yeah.
Right? You need to get them out the door. And a lot of these breakfast foods are just like, I guess it's an American thing because a lot of European countries have more proteins in their breakfasts. But we just have these like carb-heavy, sugar-heavy breakfast foods. And then, of course, I know when I eat something like that first thing in the morning, I crash.
Yeah, no wonder they need that mid-morning
snack. Yes, exactly.
Of course kids are going to crash, right? So one of the things, too, is that, I embrace the non-traditional foods. It doesn't have to be a granola bar or a sweet cereal or something like that. If your kid wants a cheese stick and an apple for breakfast, that's a solid breakfast.
Yes,
yeah.
Right? It doesn't have to fit the breakfast box.
Right. And my kids love yogurt. And, if they want to eat a great yogurt for breakfast, that's great. Yeah. It has protein. So be it. That's a win. And that's also quick and easy. But it's not something that I ever ate for breakfast growing up. Now, when it comes to kids, another thing that I know that many parents have experienced are picky eaters, or it's not even that sometimes they're not picky eaters, but they just have issues with texture. How do you guide parents when they're really struggling and you know that they need to make these different dietary changes for whatever condition you're targeting? How do you help guide parents with these kids?
Definitely. This is something that is super common in my practice. I see a whole range of children with different medical issues, sensory issues, picky eating is huge. And so I do find that a lot of times kids that are extremely picky, I have found that they will loosen up once we correct some of these deficiencies.
Fascinating.
It is.
So they seem more willing to try new
things. Their
things?
body gravitates towards what is healing and making them feel better. Yeah. It's interesting. And so it can be in really small amounts. Like some of these kids, I'll do something as simple as okay, let's have your child do an ounce or 2 of a fresh pressed juice. So think about how much bang for your buck as far as nutrients you're getting into maybe an ounce of that. We're not talking about one of the ultra processed apple juices or something like that. We're talking about a cold pressed juice that's got a variety of some fruits, vegetables, some superfoods in it, basically. And so once they start loosening up on something like that, their body naturally gravitates towards opening up, their diet and their taste.
And I know with adults, definitely see, and I personally, as well with patients, know that once you have had more whole foods in your diet, then you start craving them more. So that makes sense, but it's not something that I had really thought about. And that's such a creative way to do it for kids.
And one other way, too, is smoothies. Or thinking about, too, okay, well, what is this child craving? Do they like a lot of cold foods? Some kids crave ice, maybe because they're iron deficient, and so they want popsicles and ice. You can get a smoothie, or if they like purees, something like that, you can make something something into a popsicle, eating frozen fruits. Like some kids like the texture of like a frozen vegetable. Yeah, so it's really interesting. It's kind of trying to gear towards, okay, what is this child gravitating towards and how can I get something into them?
I love frozen peas.
You were expecting that. Sorry that we came out of left field.
But I'll tell you a story. When my son was sick, he actually craved frozen green beans. He liked frozen green beans.
I'm going to have
Isn't
to try that one
weird?
this week.
This is great advice, by the way.
You don't have to put that in the podcast. I don't want to
Love it.
I don't want to embarrass him. But he craved frozen green beans. Isn't
This is
that
great.
weird?
You're
It
giving
is
me
weird.
tips to help my toddler right now. So I'm loving this. I'm like absorbing these right now myself.
It does not have to be the traditional thing, right? Yeah. So
So we saw picky eaters a lot in adults as well. One thing that a pediatrician had given me advice before on kids is dipping. Is that something okay? Like if you're just trying to get your kid to eat more vegetables, but they want to dip it in ranch or hummus or something like that, is that one strategy that you've seen help?
yeah, I mean, I've seen that for sure. I'd say anything to kind of get your child more engaged and able to eat a certain food. So like whether it's being more active in the preparation of it, having variety on their plate. You know, some kids don't like the pressure of, oh man, I just have half my plate is carrots and I feel like I have to eat all these carrots. I've seen the strategy of kind of having like a bento box or a child charcuterie board sort of a style. You can really change it up, but also having the child involved in the preparation of the meal can also be helpful.
I find that so helpful. When my children help cook something, there is no way they're not trying it.
Yep.
And so anytime they're like, hey, Mom, can I help? Even though it makes it take longer and maybe messier, it definitely is if I have my youngest who's 2.5 in there. But it's worth it because they will. They put the effort in helping cook and they're going to try it. They may or may not like it, but it at least helps them experience the whole experience of cooking and getting those skills as well, which I think is really important for kids.
Definitely.
And any advice for, let's say your kid's not picky, but you are just a parent that's very busy and you don't have a lot of free time, plus the kids are going X, Y, and Z after school, and you've really had to rely on processed foods or fast foods in order to meet the time needs of your family. Any advice for those parents on little cheats or things they can do to still conserve time?
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that I've had to make adjustments for over time with my child and some of his needs as far as he can't do gluten. And so we had to make a lot of lifestyle changes. And so one of the quote hacks that I've found that has been really helpful is just getting some really good coolers or like thermos style stuff. And you can easily just pack ahead of time for things. I mean, it is that extra step. But for me too, like I know it's really stressful for me when I see my kid really hangry, especially in a public place. And I don't like being in the position where I don't have something that I can give him quickly. And so for me, making those extra steps is definitely worth it. If we say are having full day at the zoo where they don't have gluten-free options or all of the most options that are kid-friendly, you know, we just pack a cooler worth of stuff and they're so happy. And it's a really smooth trip because they're not melting down, you know, from having like high glucose load snacks. So they can just have a steady stream of blood sugar, and it's a very enjoyable trip.
Can you give us some examples of things you take to the zoo?
Yes. As a time saver for myself is we buy a lot of pre-cut melon and fruits and things like that, pre-cut carrots. And then I do, as far as like some of like the shelf-stable stuff, we will do, you know, some pretzel sticks or things like that, some granola bars. And so just having that variety of foods available, we do some of those mozzarella cheese sticks, just stuff like so that I have, you know, I know I have a protein option. I know I have something if they need, you know, some fruit, and it makes life a lot easier.
That's one of my favorite things about those bento boxes is because I even tell adults to use them because you look at it and if you, in your mind, you're like, I need to put a protein option there and I want to have a fruit or vegetable in this little square, and you got a little spot for the dips that for if kids need that to dip. So it helps just build that structure so you remember, oh, I need to have a balanced snack versus just grabbing a couple of bags of processed foods as the only option. So that's very helpful. And sometimes if you just prep a bunch of them, it makes it really easy for you. So if you have a lot of soccer practices one week, you could have 4. So it's like, I got all 4 ready. I only did it once and filled them all up. And then I can have them when I need to run out the door to make it easier quick. And another thing you mentioned, having a thermos for my kids' lunch when they need to take lunch has been a game changer because they love eating leftovers for lunch. And it makes it so much easier when you're trying to figure out what to feed your child for lunch when you're like, hey, I know you like this. I warm it up in the morning. I put it in the thermos. They get a hot lunch and we're all happy and it's all easy. So if don't use a thermos, highly recommend it if you have to pack your kids' lunch.
Definitely. And we use the bento boxes too. And it's so nice, especially for car trips, because it's essentially like, it's just a tray,
Yes.
and you can have multiple options and you're not trying to like turn around and Mom, I want this. No, I want this. No, I want this. Yeah. So they're very travel friendly. So yes, we use those all the time. It's been a game changer.
I think it helps too with portion size, those boxes. Let me ask you your thoughts on parents that may be struggling with thinking that their kids are having a weight issue on the high side, being overweight. Any thoughts on how to help with portion size there?
Yeah, definitely. And I would say for kids, I mostly focus on not just the portion size, but it's like what are their macros essentially, right? If they're eating a lot of carb-heavy meals, that's going to make them continue to be hungry. It's not going to sit in their tummy. They're going to digest it really quickly, and then their sugar is going to be plummeting an hour or 2 later, and they're going to be hungry again. And so it's really, I try not to focus too much on just calorie counting or anything like that. In children, it's more about, okay, let's make sure that why are they so hungry, right? Let's make sure that getting what they need. If you're eating whole foods, you're not going to digest them as quickly as a bag of chips.
Yeah, that's a great thought. Really looking into, are we missing something that's making them overeat the chips after school or something like that? And when it comes to going out to eat, every kid's menu, it's French fries and chicken nuggets and hamburgers. Any recommendations for navigating the restaurant scene?
It's hard. It's really hard. We don't eat out as much just, because of some of the dietary intolerances. But I would say, trying to veer from the kids' menu if you can, even having them eat off of your plate if it's too big of a portion for a kid. But yeah.
I know we have done that before, and instead just a lot of times the kids' options are cheaper too. But maybe for my 3 kids, like let's get an adult meal and all 3 of you split that and get some more variety that way. So be okay thinking out of the box. I think great thought on that. I know a question that has to come up in pediatrics all the time, so I got to throw this one out here, is this obsession with milk. And if you don't have a milk drinker, are you hurting your child? So can you just reflect for our listeners? Because I know that some of my kids are milk drinkers, one of mine is not. So give us our thoughts on milk in kids.
Yeah, the United States is a big dairy pusher. So I would say we're kind of taught that, okay, milk is essential. You have to have these specific amount of milk in your diet and everything. Now I feel like, at least currently, we're in a state where there's a lot more options as far as, some of the nut milks and then also just loosening up on that idea. The whole reason that, milk kind of became this recommendation, I believe, is based on, the idea that it contains zinc and it's a good source of healthy fat. But there are other sources for these nutrients that milk kind of became this default for. So I'm not super strict on it. But yeah, there's plenty of options now. Lots more options than there used to be. I think I evaded that question.
That's totally fine.
And speaking of drinking, any advice on how to get kids to drink more water?
As far as having kids drink more water is just making sure that it's readily available. To be honest, I think a lot of kids just get used to drinking other sugary beverages. And so once they start getting used to that, that's what they want. And so I think just starting from a super young age is your hydration comes from water, and so you don't need a steady stream of sugar all day sort of a thing. And I don't know, my kids like it cold. So I just always make sure that there's ice in their water. And they
luckily today, kids are encouraged to bring water bottles to things. I don't remember as a child
never
having a water bottle at all. So that at least we have that in our favor nowadays.
Definitely.
Now, in your practice, I know you see a lot of children with developmental delays. Have you noticed any nutritional trends that are causing some of these, or things that you are just noticing in practice that come up a lot when you're managing these patients?
Yeah. So when I see kids with developmental delays, basically one of the things that I like to focus on is have we looked below the surface as far as some of the main etiologies of developmental delay? And so in kids, say that aren't meeting their motor milestones or they're not speaking, sometimes there can be medical causes of that are reversible. They're treatable. Something as simple as iron deficiency. Iron deficiency, I see a lot of pretty significant iron deficiency in the population that I treat. And iron is important for brain development. It's important for so many aspects of our body. Thyroid hormones, some kids, and I'm sure both of you guys remember this, but, in medical school, we're taught that hypothyroidism, is a cause of developmental delay.
Correct.
But it's not always being checked in kids. Lead exposure, that's another major one. These are all kind of like the low-hanging fruit that I initially check for, but there are plenty of other etiologies as well. But, lead exposure kind of focus on, I think in our recommendations from the American Academy of Pediatrics, we're recommended to check it once at 12 months of age, and that's about it. But lead exposure is an interesting one. You're only going to catch it when it's high in the bloodstream. So you're only going to catch, like, say, an active exposure. And so there could be kids that kind of have these chronic lower levels of exposure, or if they had something that was imported and were chewing on, a toy car with lead paint on it. It's way more common than we think because we don't know where everything is being sourced from. Yeah. So those are some of the things that are really important to assess for in kids.
And when seeing patients or pediatric patients that are having a lot of behavioral issues, is there any nutrient deficiencies that you have seen a trend in for those kids?
Yeah, I'd say, often definitely the iron deficiency is a huge one because you see that with chronic inflammation. We see that with if there's inflammation in how they're able to absorb iron. If they're on a really high cow's milk diet, that can prevent iron absorption as well. If they're getting too much calcium. And then if they're just really not taking in certain nutrients, if they're on a very high processed foods diet. Yeah. And then the other thing that I also see as kind of a trend in the standard American diet, which I'm sure you guys discuss in your practice, is the imbalance of pro-inflammatory fats versus the anti-inflammatory fats, right? And so in a child whose brain is rapidly developing, their myelin is all made of fat. And so if they're consuming a very pro-inflammatory diet and they're not getting any of the anti-inflammatory fats like omega-3s in their diet, then that can cause abnormal brain development. Basically.
And for our listeners, can you explain to them the pro-inflammatories one? You said the anti-inflammatory omega-3, but the reverse,
yes.
the ones we're talking about.
The pro-inflammatories being the omega-6s. So a lot of those ultra-processed seed oils, vegetable oil, peanut oil, stuff that things are fried in a lot of fast foods and everything. So oftentimes in the standard American diet, we're lacking those anti-inflammatories, such as good options would be a fish oil, which I do actually supplement in some of my patients, olive oil, avocado oil, some of those healthy fats to support nerve development.
I love hemp seeds because I feel like I can sprinkle them in almost anything I'm making and no one in my family has any idea.
That's awesome.
That's great. Just have omega-3s in it.
Do you grind them or are they like whole?
The one I get from the store, it says hemp hearts. So they're still decent size, but no one seems to really pay any attention. They're about the size of a sesame seed. And I think they taste great, but they've got a really neutral taste. So I sneak them in several times a week at least in dinner.
Yeah, I like the sneaky approach.
Oh, yes. Definitely.
And with so many micronutrients being deficient in children's diets today, do you recommend a multivitamin to many of your patients, or do you only do that specifically if you find a deficiency?
So I do recommend a multivitamin for the reason being, yes, that kids, oftentimes are eating a lot of these processed foods that are devoid of a lot of nutrients in them. When we think about certain micronutrients supplements like folate or folic acid. There's the manufactured kind, but then there's also the kind that we get from leafy greens. And so if your child is not eating as much leafy greens, then I do recommend supplementing. And usually I recommend a multivitamin that has kind of undergone some pretty good third-party testing as far as, we know what's in it and it's a clean one. But also I usually recommend ones that have like a blend with some of the methylated folates as well, because those are the kind that are present in foods.
I didn't realize this for a while, but when you're looking at these, to know that they've been third-party tested, they have it on the label. Like they have to show that they had that done. So you will know whether or not by just reading the label when you're looking at vitamins.
And what we mean by that third-party testing, in case you're not sure, is just that there's not a lot of regulation with supplements and vitamins. So they can pretty much make any claim they want to on the label, and no one is going behind and checking to see if that's accurate as far as what's in the supplement or vitamin. So the companies that go that extra mile to get it tested by a third party, meaning someone not involved in their company, really shows that they are giving you what they're saying they're giving you on the label, and you can feel a little more comfortable with knowing you're not just throwing your money down the drain. You're hopefully getting what you're paying for there.
And then there's also some companies, like Consumer Labs, they do a ton of third-party testing as well that you can follow. The Environmental Working Group does a lot of third-party testing. So you can really see the trends and which ones always typically test clean. So I feel confident in those brands. So.
And I'm going to lean into another hot topic here in pediatric is really talking about food dyes. And we know that there's a lot of controversy about whether or not food dyes are okay, whether or not they are causing behavioral issues. Are they carcinogenic? Are they causing immune dysfunction? What is going on with food dyes? Can you just give us an idea about all this buzz that we hear on the news?
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz about it. But, when people ask my recommendation on it, I mean, it's definitely something that I do recommend avoiding, especially if you have a child that is exhibiting really any sort of symptoms of chronic medical issues. They found to be pro-inflammatory. They affect our mitochondria. Animal studies did not go very well with them if you do a PubMed search. But they're banned in Europe. A lot of these companies have the ability to make these products without them, yet they're banned in other countries, and we allow them here in the United States. I find that particularly problematic. But, certain food dyes, they freely cross the blood-brain barrier. They're permeable. So, they can rapidly affect, kids can have behavioral symptoms, hyperactivity, and different things. Some are more sensitive than others. So not every child may have the same reaction, but some children absolutely can.
So any advice for parents out there whose kid comes off the field for their t-ball game and runs over for snack, which is their favorite part of the whole experience, and they're handed a red Gatorade and gummies? Any advice for how to handle that as a parent, or do we just hope that it's only at the t-ball game and not anywhere else?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's really frustrating. It depends on how sensitive your child is, for one, for sure. I think kind of setting the stage too, like when it's your turn to bring snack, maybe bringing a different type of a snack, and, other people can kind of see the different options that are out there. I think always just having some sort of a swap. If you don't want your child to be left out, you can have a electrolyte drink that doesn't have food dye in it waiting for them, like vitamin water or Cocoa 5 or something like that would be a good opportunity for a swap, I think. And then snack wise, I think also just having that alternative, not 100% depriving your kid, but finding that balance.
Yeah, have some leeway with yourself. Exactly. That you don't have to prevent it all the time.
Yeah.
Prevent it where you can.
Exactly.
So that it's not as bad when they do get it.
Yeah. Definitely.
Well, as we have all these listeners that are on here as parents absorbing all this nutrition information, we also would love to hear any high-yield topics related to other things in lifestyle medicine, and we'd be happy to have you on again to go in more detail. But are there any big pieces of advice for like physical activity, sleep, stress, social connection that you can tell parents to really spend some time on to help their kids?
Yeah, definitely. I think movement is so important for children. children. Even if your child can't be in organized sport full-time year-round, there's plenty of opportunity for movement at the house. Just any sort of, I'm probably going to get a lot of shade for this, but I like trampolines. As a pediatrician.
Oh, yeah, don't hear that often from a pediatrician.
No, but specifically, well, I see a lot of kids with sensory needs too. And so those little like small individual trampolines inside can be really nice for a way for kids to get out that extra energy, blood flow, movement, and everything. There's a lot of creative ways to keep your child moving. I think also looking at what types of movement are they seeking. If your kid's always jumping off the couch, maybe they like to jump. So let's find a better way to get that out. So,
any recommendations for sleep or stress management for kids?
Yeah. So as far as sleep, as we know, sleep is super important. Sleep is honestly one of my quote, like vital signs for a child, because it's so important, because that is when your body grows. That's when your body releases growth hormone. That's when your brain grows during sleep. It processes things as far as memories, learning, and everything. An interesting thing too is that they discovered that the brain has its own lymphatic system, and it's active when you're sleeping. So your brain needs sleep. It's been linked to a lot of medical issues. So if a child is not sleeping, that is huge. That's a big red flag for me. We need to figure out why they're not sleeping. And so a lot of times in that period leading up to bedtime, okay, what's going on? Like, are they getting super activated? Some kids in regards to energy and getting that energy out, some kids, it can actually rev them up more. So some kids need more calming activities in the evenings, like something like Legos or doing something with their hands, and also avoiding those bright lights and everything. But yeah, sleep is super important. And so kind of just making some of those lifestyle adjustments ahead of time.
Sarah loves the wind down routine.
I do.
Yes.
Thank you for tapping in. It's one of my favorite things I like to talk about for adults. So
yeah.
And it's funny because I'll even say that too if I have parents, is think about your child. You like to read to your child before bed because it helps them relax. We should do that same thing for ourselves because it's such a great way to end the day and calm our bodies, rest our minds, to be able to go to sleep.
Yeah. And really, I just want to kind of recap some of the high points we learned from Dr. Labovitz. And I think it applies to kids, but also for us as adults. So when you're just starting out thinking about avoiding food dyes and avoiding things that have high fructose corn syrup, trying to find things with single ingredients, as Sarah loves, for your child, but also for you, finding single ingredient foods for you is important too. And then if you are getting snacks and getting processed foods, look at the label, try to pick the one with the least amount of ingredients and ingredients that you actually know what they mean. And think about other ways. Like I thought the dried fruit and freeze-dried fruit was a great option. Get your kids involved in prepping the meals and realize you're not going to be perfect at every meal and snack, and that is totally fine. And when you have the opportunity to put more time into it, do it and really make sure you're getting them the nutrients they need. Otherwise, a good multivitamin will help along the way too. So we have learned so many important things from you today, Gina.
Awesome.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, this was really fun.
And please join us next week where we will be talking with Lauren Marshall, who is a great dietitian here in Lexington.
And she's going to give us some of her tips when seeing patients and that she has learned from her own experience when they're working on weight loss or weight management in general.
Also, please remember to send us your questions and ideas for topics at contact@thestartinggatepodcast.com. We hope to hear from you and hope you enjoyed this episode. Please remember to follow us and leave us a review on Apple or Spotify.
See you next week.